My estranged sister left Dad for years. Now, she's back for half of his estate, but I'm honoring his final wishes. I'm 28 male. My dad recently passed away. Losing my dad was one of the hardest things I've ever had to go through. We knew it was coming. He'd been sick for a while, but knowing didn't make it any easier. My dad was the kind of guy who thought ahead though, so he made sure everything was in order before he passed. His will was clear. I would inherit the majority of his estate, including his house and a significant amount of money. My sister, on the other hand, would receive a smaller portion, mostly sentimental items, and a bit of cash. The disparity in the inheritance was tough to stomach for her, but it wasn't a surprise to me. My sister, Sarah, and my dad didn't have the best relationship. She moved out when she was 18, and their interactions since had been sporadic at best. Dad tried to reconnect over the years, but she always kept her distance. Meanwhile, I stayed close, especially during his illness. I visited him almost every day, took him to his doctor's appointments, and handled all the things he couldn't manage anymore. It wasn't easy, but it felt right. When Dad's will was read, Sarah was furious. She called me selfish, saying it was unfair she got so little, and accusing me of being complicit in some grand act of favoritism. She argued that the inheritance should be split 50-50, regardless of what Dad wanted. Family is family, she said. It's not fair to punish me for the issues I had with him. But here's the thing, I don't see it that way. My dad's decisions weren't about punishment, they were about recognition. Sarah had years to repair their relationship, and chose not to. It wasn't my job to fix what she wouldn't. I told her as much, that I respected Dad's wishes, and didn't think it was my place to rewrite them. Unsurprisingly, that didn't go over well. My mom, who divorced my dad years ago, sided with Sarah. She's been telling me I should do the right thing and give Sarah more money to keep the peace. Some friends agree with her, but others think I'm justified in keeping what I've been given. It's a mess, and honestly, it's making me question everything. Am I selfish for holding on to what Dad left me? Or am I just honoring his wishes? To fill in some gaps, let me explain a bit more about our family dynamics. My parents' divorce happened when I was 12, and Sarah was 9. It wasn't explosive. There wasn't one big event that tore them apart, but it was messy in its own way. My dad was a workaholic, running his own business and putting in long hours to provide for us. My mom felt neglected and resented how much time he spent away from the family. She'd often say things like, "He cares more about his work than his kids." Eventually the tension boiled over, and they split. After the divorce, Sarah and I ended up in different households. She stayed with Mom, while I lived with Dad. I think that's where the divide really started. Mom's bitterness toward Dad rubbed off on Sarah. She began to see him as the villain in our family story. Over time, the distance between them grew. Dad tried. He'd call her, send her gifts, show up to important events, but she rarely reciprocated. One of the last straws was her high school graduation. Dad showed up uninvited because he wanted to celebrate her, but Sarah accused him of trying to make it about himself. After that, their relationship all but evaporated. When Dad got sick, I hoped it might be a chance for them to reconcile. I called Sarah multiple times, letting her know how serious things were, but she wouldn't come. She said she wasn't ready to see him. Dad never got angry about it. He just said, she has to come on her own terms. Unfortunately, those terms never materialized. He passed without ever getting that closure. So, when people ask why Dad didn't just split everything 50-50, I think it's pretty clear. He wasn't trying to be cruel. He was trying to reflect the reality of our family dynamic. I was there for him in his final years. Sarah wasn't. That's not to say she didn't have her reasons, but those reasons don't change the fact that Dad's decisions were his to make. Of course, that doesn't make this any easier. Sarah's been relentless. She's called me selfish, greedy, even manipulative. She's tried to frame this as me taking advantage of Dad's favoritism, but that's not how I see it. I'm not the golden child. I'm just the one who stayed. Mom's pressure hasn't helped. She's always been closer to Sarah, and I think she feels guilty about how everything played out. She's been pushing me to give Sarah more money, saying things like, "You're the older sibling. You should set an example." But I'm not sure how caving to Sarah's demands sets a good example. If anything, it feels like it would undermine everything Dad stood for. Some of my friends think I'm being too rigid. "It's just money," they say. "Is it really worth ruining your relationship with your sister?" But other friends think Sarah is out of line. They've pointed out that she had years to make amends with Dad and chose not to. Why should I be expected to fix that now? To be honest, I'm torn. I want to honor Dad's wishes, but I also don't want to destroy what's left of my relationship with Sarah. Part of me wonders if there's a middle ground, but every time I try to bring it up, she shuts me down. It's all or nothing for her. Either I give her half the inheritance, or I'm the bad guy. I've tried to explain my perspective, but it doesn't seem to matter. To Sarah, this is about fairness. To me, it's about respect. Respect for Dad's decisions, respect for the time and energy I put into caring for him, and respect for the reality of our family's history. I can't change what happened between Dad and Sarah, and I don't think it's fair for her to expect me to. At the same time, I'm not blind to the bigger picture. Money has a way of tearing families apart, and I don't want this to be the thing that ruins ours. But where do I draw the line? How much am I supposed to sacrifice to keep the peace? And is it even worth it if the peace is so one-sided? For now, I'm sticking to my decision. I'll respect Dad's wishes and keep the inheritance as he intended. If Sarah wants to talk, I'm open to it, but I'm not going to let her guilt me into something that feels wrong. I hope she can understand that someday, but even if she doesn't, I need to make peace with it myself. In the end, this isn't just about money. It's about love, loss, and the complicated ways those things intertwine. My dad wasn't perfect, and neither is our family, but he did the best he could, and I'm trying to do the same. Maybe that's all any of us can do. There's another layer to all of this, one I've been hesitant to talk about because it's deeply personal. Growing up, Sarah always felt closer to Mom. They had this bond I could never quite understand, and I often felt like an outsider when the three of us were together. Dad was my anchor in those moments. He'd take me fishing, help me with my homework, or just sit and talk with me when things felt too overwhelming. He wasn't perfect, but he made me feel seen in a way I didn't always get from Mom or Sarah. I think that's part of why I'm so protective of what he left me. It's not just about the money or the house. It's about preserving the connection we had. Every time I walk into that house, I feel like he's still there with me. The idea of giving up a part of that to someone who barely acknowledged him in his final years feels like a betrayal, not just of him, but of everything we shared. At the same time, I can't ignore the guilt that's been creeping in. What if Sarah's right? What if I'm holding on to this inheritance out of spite, even if I don't realize it? I've been replaying our conversations in my head, trying to figure out if there's any truth to what she's saying. But every time I come back to the same conclusion. This isn't about her. It's about him. It's about honoring the choices he made and the life he built. Recently I've been thinking about what Dad would say if he were here. Would he want me to stand my ground? Or would he want me to find a way to make peace with Sarah? I'll never know for sure, but I like to think he'd understand why I've made the choices I have. He always believed in taking responsibility for your actions, and I'm trying to do that, even if it's messy and imperfect. Sarah and I haven't spoken much since the argument about the inheritance. Every time I've tried to reach out, it's ended in another fight. I miss her though. Despite everything, she's still my sister, and I don't want this to be the thing that drives us apart forever. But I also know that I can't keep bending over backward to make her happy, especially when it feels like she's unwilling to meet me halfway. In the end, I think this situation has taught me a lot about family, grief, and the way we carry the people we've lost. Dad's legacy isn't just in the money or the house he left behind. It's in the lessons he taught me and the memories we shared. That's what I'm holding on to, and that's what I'll continue to honor, no matter how complicated things get with Sarah. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that love and loss are never simple. They're messy, beautiful, and painful all at once. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's what makes them so powerful. So, for now, I'll keep moving forward, one step at a time, holding on to the love and letting go of the rest.